We continue now at the top of Daf Tzadi Aleph Amid Aleph and Meseches Zevachim. This is Zevachim Daf 91a. On the previous summon, the Gemara asked, let's say you have something which is Tadir versus something which is more Kodesh. Which one comes first? And the Gemara is in the middle of bringing a proof from the Mishnah. The Mishnah said that Tamidin come before Musafin because Tamidin are Tadir. They're more frequent. And the Gemara now says, V'afal Gav, and even though the Musafin Kadishi, we're talking about Musafin of Shabbos, they're more holy. And so therefore you see that frequency comes first. And the Gemara says, Atu Shabbos l'musafin ahanoi, l'tamidin lo ahanoi. Do you think that Shabbos, meaning the day of Shabbos, that gives Kedusha to the Musafin, but it doesn't give Kedusha to the Tamidin? The Tamidin have the same Kedusha, and that's why the Tamidin come first. Rashi explains, V'afagav de Musafin Kadishi, Musafin Shem Shabbos alehen. Musafin, the name of Shabbos is upon them. Shem boim chovim lo, because they're coming as an obligation for Shabbos. V'atamidin boim af bechol, but Tamidin come even on the weekdays. And then the Gemara said, L'tamidin lo hanoi, does it not work? Is it not effective for the Tamidin? Kaven dehoidna kareven, since they're being brought now, im kain, if so, Shem Shabbos aleim. So the name of Shabbos is upon the Tamidin as well. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here, another proof from the Mishnah, Musvei Shabbos, Kodman LeMusvei Rosh Chodesh. The Musvei Shabbos, they precede the Musvei Rosh Chodesh because, again, they are Tadir, they're more frequent. And again, the assumption is that the Musvei Rosh Chodesh are more Kodesh. And the Gemara again says, Atu Rosh Chodesh LeMusafin Didei Ahani. Do you think that Rosh Chodesh, it gives its holiness only to its Musafin? LeMusvei Shabbos Lo Ahani, it doesn't help. It doesn't give that Kedusha to the Musvei Shabbos. They have the same Kedusha. Rashi explains, Musvei Rosh Chodesh Mukudashin Mishal Shabbos. The Musvei Rosh Chodesh are holier than those of Shabbos, the Ikri Moed, because Rosh Chodesh is called a Moed, and that's why it has that higher level of holiness. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here, another proof from the Mishnah, Musvei Rosh Chodesh, Kodman LeMusvei Rosh Hashanah. Musvei Rosh Chodesh precede Musvei Rosh Hashanah. Afal Gav, the Rosh Hashanah Kitsha, even though Rosh Hashanah is holier. And again, the Gemara says, Atu Rosh Hashanah LeMusvei Didei Ahani, LeMusvei Rosh Chodesh Lo Ahani. Do you think that Rosh Hashanah gives its Kedusha to its Musafin and not the Musvei Rosh Chodesh? They get the Kedusha as well. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here, a proof from the following Braisa, Davar Acher, another explanation. We'll take a look at Rashi. Rashi says, Davar Acher b'psachim taninan law. This is brought down in Psachim. To Ka'amri Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel over there in Psachim, they say, Mevorech al hayayin v'yachar kach mevorech al hayom. If you're making a bracha on wine and you're making a bracha on the day, let's say, for example, on Shabbos, you make a bracha on the wine and then you make the bracha on the day. So Beis Hillel say, first you make a bracha on the wine, then you make a bracha on the day. Shahayayin gorim l'kiddush atomer, because it's the wine that causes kiddush to be said. And then davar acher. Then Beis Hillel have another explanation why the wine goes first. As the Brisa now continues, birchas hayayin tadira, the birchas hayayin, the bracha we make on wine that's frequent, to birchas hayom eino tadira, the bracha we make on the day is not as frequent. V'tadir v'sheino tadir tadir kodem, whatever is frequent, that takes precedence. And afal gav the birchas hayom kadisha, even though the bracha of the day has more holiness. And so again we see that tadir comes first. And again the Gemara says, Atu Shabbos levirchas hayom hanoi, levirchas hayayin lo hanoi. Do you think that Shabbos is effective? It gives the Kedusha to the birchas hayom and not to the birchas hayayin. It gives the Kedusha to both. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here, the following proof, the Amar Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Yochanan says, halacha, the halacha is, mispalel adam shal mincha, a person first davens mincha, v'yachar kach shal musaf, and then he davens musaf, meaning if the time for mincha has arrived, so then now the person still hasn't daven musaf, so mincha comes first, and then musaf again, because tadir, whatever is more frequent, is going to come first. And the assumption again is that the musafin, that tefillah has more holiness. And the Gemara says, Atu Shabbos l'tfilas musafin hanoi, l'tfilas mincha lo hanoi. Again, the Gemara says that do you think Shabbos gives its kedusha only to the tfilas musafin and not to tfilas mincha? Mincha has that kedusha as well. And Rashi explains, Hachi Garsinan, this is the proper text, the Afal Gav, the Birchas Hayom Kadisha, even though the bracha on the day is more holy, Shashem Shabbos Olah, because again the name of Shabbos is upon that bracha. Shechova l'Shabbos Hibah, because it's coming as an obligation for Shabbos. Te'ilu Birchas Hayayin, Af Becholi, because the bracha we make on wine, we even make on the weekday. And then the Gemara said, Halacha Mispalel Shal Mincha, the halacha is that Mincha is davened before Musaf, and Meseches Brachas, this is in Meseches Brachas, Hayu Lefanav Shtei Tfilos Shal Musaf and V'Shal Mincha, let's say he has before him two tefillos, musaf and mincha, he has to daven both. Upligi Rabbi Yehuda v'Rabbanan, on that issue Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan argue. V'kamer Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yochanan says, halacha kedivrei ha'omer mispal shal mincha v'yachar kach mispal. The halacha is like the one who says first mincha is davened and then musaf. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here a proof from our Mishnah, Shlamim shel Emesh, if the Shlamim from yesterday and the Chatos v'Yasham shel Yom, and a Chatos or an Asham from today, which one takes precedence? Shlamim shel Emesh Kodman, so the Shlamim from yesterday takes precedence. So we can infer Ha'idi v'Idi de Yom, let's say they were both of today, they were the same day, so then Chatos v'Yasham Kodmi, so then the Chatos and the Yasham, they would take precedence over the Shlamim. V'Afagav the Shlamim Tadiri, even though in general Shlamim is more frequent, and so you see that we actually follow Kedusha over what is more frequent. And the Gemara says, Amar Rava says, Matzoi ka'amrit. When we're saying Shlamim is more common, but that's not our issue. Tadir kami boilan. The question that we have is by Tadir, Matzoi lo kami boilan. We don't have a question by Matzoi. There's a difference between Tadir and Matzoi. And Rashi explains, Tadiri shehin mitsuyin mitoch shaboin beneder uvenadava. When the Gemara initially says that Shlamim is Tadiri, that's because it's very common, because they come through donations that people make. But then the Gemara says, Matzoi ka'amrit, that's really called Matzoi, that's different. She'ein tediruso chova. The frequency of Shlamim is not due to an obligation. Elashu Matzoi tamid yoser mechaver. It just happens to be something that is more common. That's not the same thing as Tadir. But the Gemara continues, Amar le Rav Huna bar Yehuda le Rava. Rav Huna bar Yehuda said to Rava, Atu Matzoi lav Tadir. Is Matzoi not the same thing as Tadir? V'atanya, but we learned in a Brisa as follows, Otzi as ha-Pesach she'eno Tadir. I'll exclude Karban Pesach, which is not Tadir, which is not frequent. V'lo Otzi as ha-Mila she'i Tadir, and I shouldn't exclude Mila, which is Tadira, which is frequent. And the assumption over here is that what does it mean Mila is Tadira? It means it's Matzoi. It's something that is common. So you see that Matzoi is the same thing as Tadira. Rashi explains, Otzi HaPesach she'eno Tadir b'Toras Kohanim shnuya. This brisa is in Toras Kohanim gabe Chatos. It's by Chatos. The Katani, it says over there as follows: V'harei Pesach u'Mila anushin kares. We know that Pesach and Mila are positive commandments that get kares. Now Yochol Yavi al Shegagos and Chatos. One might think, let's say Pesach and Mila, there was a mistake and they were not done. Maybe a Chatos should be brought. Generally speaking, by negative commandments where there is kares. So then we say that if it's b'shogeg, there's a Chatos. And so the brisa is addressing. Maybe one might think Pesach and Mila, there's a Chatos if it's b'shogeg. Talmud lomar asher lo se asena. It says asher lo se asena in the negative. Yatsu Pesach u'Mila shein mitzvahs aseh. That excludes Pesach and Mila because they are positive commandments and therefore they're excluded from Chatos. But then Otzias HaPesach she'eno Tadir. Maybe I should exclude Pesach because it's not frequent. V'lo Otzias HaMila she'i Tadira. I shouldn't exclude Mila, which is frequent. Talmud lomar asher lo se asena. The pasuk says again asher lo se asena. In any case, Alma Matzoi Tadir Hu. You see that Matzoi, something that is common, is considered Tadir. Those are essentially the same thing. And the Gemara continues and says that's not what it means Tadira over here. When it says that Mila is Tadira, Mai Tadira, what does it mean that Mila is Tadira? It just means Tadira b'mitzvos. It means that it's frequent with many mitzvos. Rashi explains what that means. Tadira b'mitzvos, Sedura b'mitzvos. It's arranged with mitzvos, meaning Shenichrasu aleh shalosh esrei brisos v'tzivuyin, because they were cut upon it, so to speak, 13 covenants and commandments that go along with bris Mila, and that's all it means when it says that Mila is Tadira. That's the first answer of the Gemara. And the Gemara continues, if you want, we could say another answer. It simply means Mila lagabe Pesach ki Tadir damya. For you're comparing Mila relative to Pesach, that's considered to be Tadir. It's considered to be frequent. And Rashi explains, Ki Tadir damya shemitzuya hi harbe mi Pesach. It is much more frequent than Karban Pesach. Avol motzei de shlamim lagabe motzei de chatas lav kitadira dami. But when it comes to shlamim, the frequency or how common shlamim is with regards to chatas, that's not enough to call that tadira. And the Gemara continues, Iboy lahu, they had the following question, Tadir v'sheino Tadir, by kachim, let's say one carbon is more frequent, the other is less frequent. The Tadir is generally supposed to take precedence. But in this case, v'kadim v'shachat l'sheino Tadir, the person went ahead and he slaughtered the Eino Tadir first. He slaughtered the one that was less frequent first. So what's the halach in that situation? Which takes precedence? Mi amrinon kevan de shachte makrivle. Do we say since he already slaughtered it, he offers it first? Odilma, or maybe yoiv la'achar de memaris bedamo, he gives it to someone else who will stir the blood to keep it from congealing. Ad de makrivle l'tadir, until he brings the one that's more frequent. V'hadir makriv l'sheino Tadir, and then he will offer the one that is Eino Tadir, the one that is less frequent. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Huna misura, Rav Huna from Surah said, Tashma, come and hear a proof from our Mishnah. Shlamim shel emesh, chatos v'yasham shel yom, shlamim from yesterday, a chatos and an asham from today. Shel emesh kodem l'shel yom, the one that's from yesterday precedes the one from today. So had yom dumya dumya de emesh. Now let's say it would all be today, but it would be a similar circumstance of yesterday. Vehechi damim, what would be an example of that? Dekadem shachtei l'shlamim. Let's say they're both from today, but he's already slaughtered the shlamim first. And so chatos v'yasham kadmi. So apparently the chatos and the yasham, they come first in this situation. The fact that he slaughtered the shlamim first doesn't make any difference. That's what it seems from our Mishnah. It's only because the shlamim was from yesterday that the shlamim comes first. Otherwise, the chatos and asham come first, even if the shlamim was already slaughtered. And the Gemara says, Dilma maybe shlamim de emesh v'chatos v'asham de yom. Maybe when we talk about a shlamim yesterday and a chatos and an asham today, heichi mashkachas la, what's the situation? Teshachtinu letarvayu. Maybe the situation is that both are actually slaughtered. You have a chatos and an asham from today. You have a shlamim from yesterday, and both are slaughtered, and the chatos and the asham come first. Avalo shachtinu letarvayu. But if they were both not slaughtered, so then tiboylach, then there really would be a question, meaning our case, let's say one of them was slaughtered, that might still be a question. And Rashi explains, Hadayom dumya de emesh, if it would be both today but similar to yesterday. Vehechi damim, what would be the case? Kagon de shachtu shlamim bereisha, where the shlamim was slaughtered first. And Rashi explains, V'kasal gadaitach, initially we think, Hachi kamar, this is what the Mishnah is saying. Shlamim shehivion me emesh v'shachtan hayom. You have a shlamim that was brought yesterday and it was slaughtered today. V'chatos v'yasham shal yom omdin li shachet. And then you have a chatos and an asham from today that are waiting to be slaughtered. So shlamim shal emesh kodmin li zarek. So the shlamim from yesterday comes first in terms of the zrika, in terms of the throwing of the blood. Because if they're both standing and waiting to be slaughtered, lo amar de kid mushlamim, then we wouldn't say that the shlamim goes first. It must be that the case is that the shlamim was already slaughtered. That is the situation. And then we can say v'taima debo mayamish. The only reason why the shlamim goes first is because it came yesterday. Ha'idi v'idi dehayom. Let's say they both came today. V'kadim shachtinu l'shlamim b'reish, and then the person went ahead and slaughtered the shlamim first. Amrina shchitas chatos v'yasham kidma l'zrikas shlamim. Then we would say the slaughtering of the chatos and the yasham would precede the throwing of the blood of the shlamim. Alma mekudish v'she'eno mekudish. So what do we see? We see that if you have one that's holier and one that's not as holy, v'kadim shachte l'she'eno mekudish, and he goes ahead and he slaughters the one that's not as holy first. So then yehei echad memores bedamo. Then one of them should stir the blood. V'yizrok es hamekudish, and then throw the one that is mekudish. V'huadin l'tader v'she'eno tader, and then the same should be true when it's an issue of frequency. Here it's an issue of kedusha, but the same should be true when it's an issue of frequency. And Rashi continues, the Gemara then said, Dilma shlamim shalemesh v'chatos shal yom. Maybe when it said in the Mishnah, shlamim of yesterday and the chatos of today, dashminan shal emesh kidma, where it says that the one of yesterday goes first, heichi dami deshachtinu letarvayu. Maybe the case is that both of them were slaughtered. Afagav deshachte lechatos achar hashlamim, even though the chatos was slaughtered after the shlamim, ushneyen omdin lizarik, and now they're both ready to be thrown. Ashminan de shlamim shal emesh kidma. It's teaching us that since the shlamim was from yesterday, it goes first. And then you can infer, ha'idi v'idi diyom, let's say both were from today, v'shachat shlamim v'yachar kachatos, and then the person slaughters the shlamim and then the chatos, uvo limalech al azrika, and then he's trying to decide which zrika goes first, amrinan lechatos kidma, then we would say that the chatos goes first, avolo shachtei lechatos basar shlamim, but let's say the chatos was not slaughtered after the shlamim, uvo limalech al ashchita, and he's trying to decide in terms of the slaughtering, tiboylach, then it actually would be a question. Would we be mezalzel, disgrace the shlamim by stirring its blood, and to first do the slaughtering of the chatas and then the throwing of its blood? And when we had the question by tadir and sheino tadir, that was exactly the question. Again, the eino tadir was slaughtered, but the tadir is still standing in front of us, and we don't necessarily have an answer to that question. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here a proof from the Braisa we brought above. Davar Acher said another explanation, Birchas hayayin tadira, the blessing on the wine is frequent, Uvirchas hayom eino tadira, and the blessing of the day is not as frequent. V'tadir v'sheino tadir, tadir kodem, and when you have tadir and eino tadir, the one that's more frequent takes precedence. And the Gemara here is assuming that by the Birchas hayom, since it's already Shabbos, that would be the equivalent of the Birchas hayom being slaughtered, so to speak, and still we say that tadir kodem. And the Gemara says, Hachanami, Hachanami here also, Dechevan Da'asyon, since in this situation it came before us, the wine is right in front of us, Keman Deshchiti Tarvayu Dami, it's actually like both of them are slaughtered, and it would not necessarily answer our question. And Rashi explains, Birchas Hayayin Tadira, Tadir Kodem, V'afa Gavde She'eno Tadir Kodam Uva, even though the Eno Tadir is right in front of us. Shachvar Kiddush Hayom, because it's already Shabbos, the day is already sanctified, and therefore it's as if it's already slaughtered, so to speak. V'adayin Yayin Loba, and still the wine has not come. V'dumya Kodim Shachte L'She'eno Tadir Bereisha, this is similar to slaughtering the Eno Tadir first. Umeshani, and then the Gemara answers, Hachanami here also, Kevan Do'asa Hashta Yayin Kamon, since the wine right now is in front of us. Umezuman lebrach, it's ready for a blessing. Keman deshchiti tarvayu legabe kodshim dami, that would be the equivalent of both being slaughtered by kodshim. Velo tifshot mina levayin, and therefore you cannot answer our question. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here a proof from the statement we brought above from Rabbi Yochanan, Diyamar Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Yochanan said, Halacha, the halacha is, Mispal Elodim Shal Mincha, first the person davens Mincha, V'achar Kach Shal Musafin, and then Musafin, because Mincha is Tadir, Mincha is more frequent, and again the assumption over here is that Musaf, standing in front of us, Musaf, that's considered like it's already slaughtered, and the Gemara again says, Hachanami here also, Kevan Demotis Man Tfilas Mincha, since the time for Mincha has come, Keman Deshchiti Tarvayu Dami, again it's as if they have both been slaughtered. And Rashi explains, V'achar kach mispal shal musafin, v'afa gav dizman musafin, asa bereisha, even though the time of musaf actually arrived before the time of mincha, and so therefore, again, the Gemara was assuming it's like one is slaughtered, and again, the Gemara then said, no, it's really like both have been slaughtered. And the Gemara continues, Amar le Ravacha breder Ravashi l'Ravina, Ravacha, the son of Ravashi, said to Ravina, Shachtu kodem chatzos pasal, if these Karban Pesach was slaughtered before Chatzos, that's a disqualification. Mipnei shenemar bo bein harboyim, because it says the words bein harboyim, that means it has to be after Chatzos. And kodem letamid, but let's say the Karban Pesach is slaughtered before the tamid shel bein harboyim, so then kosher, that's still kosher, even though the tamid shel bein harboyim is supposed to go first, but it's still kosher if the Pesach is slaughtered first. V'yei memaris bedam, when a person should stir the blood ad sheyizrok adam, until the blood is thrown. And Rashi explains, Shachtu kodem chatzos bepesach kai, we're talking about the Karban Pesach, kodem letamid shel bein harboyim, let's say it was slaughtered before the tamid shel bein harboyim, kosher, it is kosher. V'afa b'shel lechatchila mitzvah la'achar, now even though lechatchila really, it should be after the tamid shel bein harboyim, kedetanya le'el, like we learned in the Brisa earlier, yu'ucher davar shenemar bo bo'erev uvein harboyim, something that says bo'erev and bein harboyim, it should be later, ledavar shelo nemar bo ela bein harboyim bilvad, to something where it only says bein harboyim. And so what do we do in this situation, again, where the Pesach was slaughtered first? A person should stir its blood. Alma, so what do we see? What happened was, he slaughtered it earlier in a situation where it was really supposed to go later. We say to him, Lishos es hazrika, to delay the zrika, and to slaughter the tamid shel bein harboyim, which was supposed to go first, and do the zrika. So we seem to have an answer to our question from this case. And the Gemara continues and says, on here in this Mishnah, what are we dealing with? The case actually was that he did slaughter the tamid shel bein harboyim first. What happened was he slaughtered the tamid shel bein harboyim, and then before throwing the blood of the tamid shel bein harboyim, he slaughtered the Karban Pesach. And it's saying that the blood of the Karban Pesach should be stirred, and first the application of the blood of the tamid shel bein harboyim should be taken care of. And the Gemara says, Amar le Ravacha Saba Ravashi, Ravacha Saba said to Ravashi, Masnisa nami deka, we can actually infer this from the wording of the Mishnah. It's a katani because it says in the Mishnah, ad sheyizrak hadam, it says, until the blood is thrown, velo katani ad sheyishchot v'yizrak dam. It doesn't say until it is slaughtered and the blood is thrown. That implies that the tamid was already slaughtered. Shema minan, the Gemara says, indeed we see that is the case in this Mishnah. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, "Uvechulan kohanim rashayin," in all of the karbanos, the kohanim are permitted. They can eat them in any fashion that they want. And the Gemara says, "My time, what's the reason?" Amar krotz, because the pasuk says lemoshcha. It says the word lemoshcha. We understand that to mean legedula, for greatness. Kederech shamalachim ochlim. They can eat it like the kings eat, and so they prepare it in any fashion that they want. And Rashi explains, lemoshcha lechon esatim. I gave it over to you, lemoshcha. And what does that mean? Lemoshcha mitargaminan lerevu v'hainu legedula. The translation, the targum of that is for greatness, and that's how we interpret that pasuk. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah. Amar Rabbi Shimon says, Im ra'isa shemen shu meschalik ba'azara, if you see that oil is being distributed in the azara for the kohanim to eat, ein tzarech lishol ma'u, you don't need to ask what it is. Elamosa rikike minchas Yisrael, it's either the leftover of the wafers of the karban mincha of Yisrael, the log shemen shel mitzora, or it could be the leftover of the log shemen of the mitzora. And Im ra'isa shemen shu nitan al gabi ha'ishim, if you see oil that it's placed on the fire on the mizbeach, ein tzarech lishol ma'u, you don't need to ask what it is. Elamosa rikike minchas kohanim, it's the leftover from the wafers of the minchas of the kohanim, minchas kohen Mashiach, or the mincha of the kohen gadol, she'ein misnadvin shemen, because there's no concept of donating oil. Rabbi Tarfon says misnadvin shemen, there is a concept of donating oil. And Rashi explains shehu mischalik la'achilas kohanim, if it's divided up for the eating of the kohanim, moser rikike minchas Yisrael, it's the leftover from the wafers of minchas Yisrael. That's the minchas mafeh shabach chalos or rekikin. That's the minchas mafeh, which can come as chalos or rekikin, as loaves or wafers. Chalos bolalon rekikin moshchan. The chalos are mixed with oil. The rekikin are anointed with oil. V'yam Rabbi Shimon ben Menachos, and Rabbi Shimon says in Menachos, moshchan kamin chaf yevonis, that the way it's anointed is like a chaf yevonis, a Greek chaf. Ushar hashemen nechol kohanim, and the rest of the oil is eaten by the kohanim. So it could be again from the most rekike minchas Yisrael. And then the Mishnah said minchas kohanim. When it comes to the minchas kohanim, so kula kolo, that is entirely burned on the mizbeach. Umoser minchas kohen Mashiach, and then the leftover from the minchas kohen Mashiach, lefisha shamna meruba, because it has a lot of oil, shlosha lugan lisaron, it's 3 lugan lisaron. When we talk shiafuya tchilan, since it's baked first, ein shamna nivla befiteh, it doesn't get absorbed, v'tzarech lahaktir hamoser ba'atzmo, so then he has to burn the remainder by itself. She'ein misnadvin shemen, and then the Mishnah said because shemen is not donated, lefikach lo yale al daitcha, therefore it should not occur to you sheyeh shemen hameschalik min haniktar nedava, that this shemen is from that which was donated, because it is not donated. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Tzadi Aleph Amud Beis.